In this video, we're going to go over the slope of horizontal and vertical lines. So in a previous video, we've covered the slope of the slope of lines, what I sometimes call slanty lines. So lines that are at an angle, so to speak. And we've also talked about the idea of horizontal and vertical lines, as well as the equations of horizontal and vertical lines. Now we're going to focus on the slope of horizontal and vertical lines. But before we get into that, first let's recall what the slope is as a concept. The slope of a line is a measurement of how steep the line is. And so what we looked at before is if I have a line that's got that kind of steepness, and then a second line with this kind of steepness, that first line I drew is going to have a smaller measurement of slope than the second line I drew, because the second line is steeper. In a sense, if you think of driving a car from left to right across the graph, the one that hits this is going to be going up a lot steeper of a hill than the one that comes in and hits this line. We also talked about the notion that this line here has a positive slope, whereas this line would have a negative slope, because again, driving from left to right across the graph, we'd be going downhill with that. And we saw that with calculating the slope given two ordered pairs, that also works out to be a negative rate of change on the points as we move across the graph. So again, the red one has a negative slope, the blue one has a positive slope. So with that idea of just the concept of a slope being how steep the line is, now we'll look at horizontal lines. So when I have a horizontal line, and we're thinking in terms of the steepness of the line, what seems most intuitive to say with the slope of a horizontal line is that the slope is 0, because it really doesn't have a steepness. So again, it's not good, well, not again, I haven't said this yet, but sometimes people will say no slope, and that's something to just stay away from. So here we're giving it a numeric value, and the numeric value of its steepness is 0. Stay away from saying no slope, that gets you in trouble. So that's the idea of the slope of a horizontal line. Any horizontal line is going to have the slope of 0. But let's look at what that looks like inside of the slope formula. So let's say we just pick out a couple ordered pairs here, that point there and this point here. That first one I bolded in is the coordinates -2, -3, and the second one I bolded in has the coordinates 1, -3. Now let's recall, like when we're working with the slope formula, that we take the difference in the y values on the top and the difference in the x values on the bottom. So plugging our coordinates in, that would give us a -3 minus a -3 on the bottom, on the top, and a 1 minus a -2 on the bottom. And then doing the math on that, we have that the double negative is a positive, or x is a plus. And so in the numerator, we're going to get a 0. And in the denominator, we get a 3. And 0 divided by 3 is 0. So when you apply the formula, the slope works out to be 0, which is good, because that intuitively makes sense. When you define math concepts, you want the intuition to kind of follow with what actually works out with the numbers. If we calculated the slope of that line and we got that it was a 10, that would be counterintuitive. So the formula verifies our thinking that the slope of a horizontal line should be 0. All right, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and switch to the slope of a vertical line, which is a little bit different of an idea. I moved our horizontal line work up to give us some space for vertical lines, and I'm going to work the vertical lines and this vertical line in red to contrast the work. Put it out here. So vertical lines going straight up and down. Now there it's like, okay, what's the steepness of that? And This one's a little harder and not as intuitive to come up with. But the idea there is what we say is that the slope is undefined. I'll just let the cat out of the bag on that one. Now before I go on, I want to address a couple points of confusion with undefined. First of all, undefined, again, does not allow for the phrase no slope. You just want to stay away from the phrase no slope because it's ambiguous and doesn't have like a defined meaning in math. So we say the slope is undefined. The other thing is the word undefined and no solution in math oftentimes get interchanged, and those are very, very different things. So basically, undefined in math means that we've arrived at a situation that we cannot mathematically define. It's not going to work with the numbers. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means it's a situation where I can't assign a numeric value. And that's what's going on with the slope of a vertical line. Now, there are other places in math where you run into the idea of undefined. But with the slope of a vertical line, we can't assign its steepness value, a numeric value. So it's not that it doesn't have steepness, it's that it doesn't have numeric value. Sometimes people will say it has infinite steepness, but the idea of saying undefined means that it doesn't have a numeric value. Now let's see how that works out with the slope formula. So let me bold in a couple points here. So that first point is the order pair 6, -2. And the second point is the order pair 6, 3. So again, when we apply our slope formula, we're taking the difference in the y's divided by the difference in the x's. So with our values we have there, with the y's, that means we're going to be taking a 3 minus a -2. And then with the x's, we'll be doing 6 minus 6. So working out the numbers there, this double negative in the top it works as a plus. So it's really 3 plus 2. That gives us a 5. And then 6 minus 6 in the bottom is a 0. And as we've seen before, division by 0 is a very bad thing. We say that's undefined. And again, what we mean by undefined is just there's not a numeric value for this situation. And in another video, I explain why division by 0 is undefined, because you can't have something and divide it into nothing. It's not a possibility. It doesn't make sense based on how we define division. So there we have it. The slope of a horizontal line is 0. The slope of a vertical line is undefined. And the other thing with that is if you get a slope of 0, that means you're dealing with a horizontal line. Whether or not you knew you were dealing with a horizontal line, as soon as you realize the slope is 0, that means it's horizontal line. Same thing with undefined. If you try to find the slope of a line and you get that the result is undefined, then that means that you're dealing with a vertical line. All right, go ahead and give some of these a try and see how you fare.